welcome to episode number 36, Deadwood Tobacco Company Blow and Smoke Podcast. I am your host, Eye Candy Randy, and joining me for today's episode from Crowned Heads, everybody say hello to Miguel Schoedel.
Thank you for having me on. I always enjoy being here with you guys. Thanks.
Absolutely. And of course, the second in command, Mr. Wild Bill.
¿Cómo te llamas? Guillermo. Hey, how you doing?
Guillermo,
Yeah,
nice
let's
to
have a
meet you,
good
Guillermo.
time. Yeah, man.
It's
Chingawa.
going to be that kind of show. We've got a special one coming up for you. And of course, as always, behind the board mixing and mastering is the preacher, Ethan. Welcome, Ethan.
Thank you so much.
We've got a couple of house cleaning items. It is currently, as we record this, the Deadwood Jam weekend. And by the time this airs, of course, Miguel will be back on his way to his next stop. But he was in and had a very, very successul weekend. It was a lot of fun, great sticks. It was a pleasure watching you work the humidor as well. Everybody we have in has their own style. And I really appreciated all the knowledge that you put into, especially the novice smokers.
Thank you.
You really kind of guided them to where they were looking to go. And we'll have you back soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. You know, I don't know how many Deadwood jams I've done. I always look forward to it, and I just love being here with you guys.
And we have coming up next weekend is going to be Hops and Hogs. That's a ticketed event. There are a few tickets available at the deadwood.com. You can grab those tickets. We are hosting the Saturday VIP tasting here. Now, that's a $100 ticket, but we have 18 different beers from our good friends in Global Distributing all around. We've got everything from Minnesota to Texas to Colorado to California. You name it. Come on down and get yourself some delicious beers. It's also an event for the entire city, so get those tickets at deadwood.com. There's a few of them left, and we look forward to sampling some great beers from Global. And then next weekend is Oktoberfest, and our good buddy Shiner Maxwell will be here in town. And also we will have Crux Cigars featured. Great deals. And he was here for the previous event earlier this year, and the brand new one was the Epicure Habano. Very, very tasty cigar. So make sure you come on out and visit us during those. And first, we're going to start like we always do. Mr. Wild Bill, what are you smoking?
A cup of coffee known as the Padron 4000 Maduro.
Excellent.
Very good. Miguel?
I'm smoking our Mil Diaz blend, the original OG blend, and in the new Topaz size, 4 7/8 by 56 with a pigtail.
The pigtail is important on that smoke.
It is. It's important to the size.
Yeah.
Important to the size.
Yeah. Why?
Tradition.
That's cool.
That's how originally it was made. Tradition.
It's like how I put my pants on.
Yeah,
Tradition.
one leg at a
Tradition?
time.
That's right.
No, he does 2 legs at a time.
Just
I jump straight in.
jump right in.
Buckle up.
I've seen it. It's awesome.
And
It's
you
amazing.
can learn a lot more about that particular cigar a little later on. We're going to have a special feature. Be looking out for that. Miguel will be back joining us for that as well. And Ethan, what are you smoking today?
I'm smoking the pastry chef, La Patissier.
Ooh, Le Patissier from Crown Heads. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Thank you.
Is that a caramel apple delight, or is that like a cinnamon roll?
It's like a chocolate covered espresso bean.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So how come we don't have chocolate covered espresso beans in front of us?
I ate them all last night.
That's fair enough.
I'm hopped up, man, on espresso
That means there's
beans.
crumbs in the bed.
True that.
Yeah.
And I am having a delicious My Father Don Pepin Garcia original. Follow my second smoke of the day. It's pretty early for me, so a nice pick it up a little bit and enjoy the medium body and a little bit meatiness in there.
That cigar put them on the map.
Is this the one?
Yeah, that's the one that put them on the map, the original blue. Obviously, the band's a little fancier than the original one, but that was what put My Father on the map.
And I've only been with the DTC here for less than a year, but the first time we got him in the humidor, I really enjoyed every one of the line that we carried. It's very, very, very flavorful.
They make a lot of cigars for us. We absolutely love them.
Very
I
good.
like the JJ.
The JJ was one of the original blends, too.
Yep.
All
And the Cuban
right.
Classic.
Cuban Classic, not the Le Bijou.
No.
A little too much for you?
That came out way later.
Very
way
good.
later.
Well, today is going to be a special episode. I'm going to have Ethan fill you in a little bit more down the road about why it's special and how this came to be. But first, we would like Miguel to take the floor. We're going to be discussing the best master blenders of all time and the opinion of Miguel and Wild Bill. So Miguel, why don't you start us off and just kind of give us a background of the 5 we'll be featuring, a little bit of your experience with their product, and then we'll dive into the rest of it.
I think it's the word master blender gets overused a lot in this industry, right? There's guys that'll go down, make one cigar, and they come back and they call themselves a master blender. I think if you're a master blender, you have to dedicate your life to tobacco, not just cigar making, but understanding tobacco, understanding farming, understanding how fermentation affects tobacco. All of that leads you to be a master blender. So
but you also, I believe, have to have a relationship with a particular master grower.
Absolutely. So the guy who is the master blender, he's only as good as his rollers can translate his work, right? If you're a master, if you're the head chef, you're not making every dish. You've got guys in your kitchen. If you've ever seen an incredible kitchen work, it's yes chef, no chef, yes, and you're showing it, and everyone knows Gordon Ramsay. It's part. That's how it all comes together. But the word master blender is overused in this industry. A lot of people validate blends, and that's something that John Huber at Crown Heads is very much. When someone says, "Oh, you're the master blender for Crown Heads," he says, "No. We work with legendary guys like Ernesto Perez Carrillo. We work with guys like Don Pepin Garcia.
So
we
basically,
work with guys like
let's
Pichardo.
just put it like this: if you have money and you can afford a company and start it out and make cigars and sell them, that's amazing. Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah.
There's a few companies like that.
Yeah.
That does not make you a master blender. Period.
Truth.
Okay. Now your cigars may sell, and that's great.
Yep.
But stop calling yourself a master blender.
100%.
All right, let's put that out there for the sake of this conversation.
You and I are on the exact same page. You've met a lot of people in this business. There's guys that like John Huber who say, "Listen, we work with these legendary cigar makers and master blenders." Now, John drives the boat, right? He'll say, "Hey, I want this," or "I'm looking for this," or "Hey, can you take this leaf out and add this leaf?" But at the end, we're validating blends, and that's what most people do in this industry. But it's so cool to call yourself a master blender. I think master blending isn't just sitting down and making a cigar. It's educating yourself on the leaf, on the growing, on all the aspects of what to get to that final stage of blending.
Put it to you like this: if you
before.
say I'm a master blender. You're not a master blender.
There you go. Actually, to be honest with you,
you're a masturbator.
Actually, it's funny. Actually, John says that. He says most of the people that are true master blenders, they don't even call themselves master blenders.
No.
You know what I mean? They just, it is what it is. So
if you're going to blend something and it's going to be masterful, the artwork itself is going to express to the commoner what it is, and the commoner's either going to reject it or he's going to fall in love with it.
Yeah.
And the majority of people will fall in love with it. But then it becomes, can it stand the test of time? Is that a true master blender that stops creating, but what he created still is blended?
Yeah, and can it, stand the test of time?
Because a master blender can make a cigar and he can create it, and then he sells it, and then he disappears, and then he comes back. Is that a master blender or is that a marketer?
There's more marketing, I think, than blending or master blending in that aspect.
All right, because there's a few that I will attack that way.
Yeah. I think for me,
not to discredit them, and because I don't have any expertise in it, but I think there's some outstanding quality people who aren't on that list.
Yeah, 100%. So for me, if you said, Miguel, who's your favorite master blender? I can give you that. Now,
I won't even know the dude's name, I guarantee it.
No, if you tell me, give me a top 5, well, I'm leaving out another 10 or 20 that I love and respect. Oh. It's so hard, right? But for the sake of the show, I pared it down to 5 people, and I may not even smoke their cigars all the time, but these are people that I feel have a huge influence on our industry and what they have created. And you have so many incredible cigar makers as well, right? I think Rocky Patel, Crowned Heads.
What about the one-hit wonders? Those albums that come out and create a good song and then they disappear.
Of course,
right?
Absolutely. Or on top of that too, to add to those guys who maybe had 1 or 2 big hits and then they're no longer around. But how many master blenders that were around in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s?
We don't even know who they are.
We don't even know their names anymore.
They could be out of St. Louis.
Well,
they could be out of. Where else back then? St. Louis was a big mecca for cigars.
Cleveland, Ohio, New Jersey, Florida.
So all those people that had the nickel cigars that were blending their Perforito blimp.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. There's so many great master blenders that we will never remember their name. And I think the cigar makers of today, we pay homage to those whose names have been lost to time, but we would not have the industry today if it wasn't for those guys. And a lot of those guys, their names have been lost to history.
Let's start with something fairly easy, just to fill in those who might not be as familiar with cigars. What would you say, in a nutshell, describe the process and the role of the blender, much less a master blender, as we discussed just now, probably something you won't call yourself, but just describe quickly what the blender's job is in creating a cigar start to finish.
So traditionally what you would come to is either that cigar, master blender is making a cigar for himself or for his company or for a client, right? Typically you start off with, this is what we're looking to start with. All right, I'm looking for, let's say I go to a master blender and I say to them, hey, I'm looking for a full-bodied, medium strength, something that has really nice mahogany, woodsy notes. I may not be able to tell you what tobacco can give me those flavors, but a master blender will have a Rolodex in their mind of tobacco that they have that will be able to fit those. That doesn't necessarily mean that they all pair well together. And that's the job of the master blender, to start picking different tobaccos to meet that goal and start putting different tobaccos together and testing them and tasting them. And ultimately, this is the short version, and blending it and removing things, adding things. Sometimes, you say, hey, you want this really nice full-bodied cigar, but actually I need to put a real mild Piloto Cubano Dominican leaf in there to kind of take some of the edge off, right? Where somebody else who doesn't know may think just put all strong tobaccos, in there. So there's those little nuances. And we all know that as soon as a cigar is rolled, you smoke it, it's going to be very wet, very young, very raw. But if you put it in an aging room for 30 days and then you revisit it, how did those tobaccos marry together? And maybe that cigar, when you first smoked it after it was rolled, you go, I like where it's going. But after 30 days, you go, actually, no, it's flat. So then you got to go back and pick what tobacco is letting you down in that blend. That's the most elementary way I can put it.
Sure. One other thing about that, though, is also the master blender has a wealth of knowledge on cost.
Yes.
Because they're not just blending a cigar because they have the tobaccos. They also know they have to blend to a cost, so it's affordable. Mm-hmm. Because you can have...
Yeah, right. You're not going to have 100% like...
No.
Let's take an expensive leaf, a broadleaf. Let's say
broadleaf.
Yeah.
And then a binder can be a Cameroon easily to sweeten it up. Mm. But then you can have some of... what the hell is their name? They make Ligero in Nicaragua.
They make Ligero?
Yeah,
they grow Ligero.
They make, that's what they grow, and they're known for it. I forget what the kind it's called. It's escaping my mind. But you can load up all their Ligero, and you can make a strong cigar. It might have some sweetness. You use quality tobacco. You roll a cigar.
Yeah.
I mean, you blended it. All right, you're a master of your own base.
And it's also, too, those tobaccos after they've aged. Like, this Esteli Ligero is too strong for the blend, but let's get a Ligero that's been aged for 2 years. So all of that plays into it. And the best way I can describe it, it's a chef. I can give all three of us the same 20 ingredients to make dinner tonight. We can have 3 completely different dishes. We can have 3 completely different tasting dishes. We could have everything from an elegant, unbelievable meal, and the same ingredients give you an absolute horrible experience. And that is truly what a master blender is. He is the head chef. He is the chef de cuisine. He's really the one that's putting it together. And then his job is to translate that to the supervisors on the floor of the rolling room, and making sure that the ingredients are given particularly in the right put the right amounts of these leaves, this leaf, and translate that blend, not necessarily telling the roller what he's rolling, but saying you need 2 of these, 1 of those, half of that, and making sure that is translated.
Is there more than one way to skin a cat when you start with a blend, or is it typical that maybe the master blender starts with the wrapper, or is it just individual preference and experience?
So it could be different every single time. There's no one way. There are cigar makers who go, man, I got this incredible crop of Ecuador Habano. I want to create a blend around this wrapper. Other times you go, man, I got this filler. It's 3 years of age. It's tasting great. I'm going to use that. Typically it's wrapper or binder, or filler. At the same time, it can also just be, hey, I want to create a mild cigar because I don't have that in my portfolio. So there is no rhyme or reason how it can start. You can be inspired by a flavor. You can be inspired by a taste. You can be inspired by a leaf, a concept even, something that Crowned Heads has done before, where sometimes we have we'll make a cigar that's kind of sonically inspired, by a song. You can be inspired by an ingredient. All that plays a part. So there is no, this is the way it's done. And it's truly done by the Rolodex of tobacco and flavor that you have in your mind. Now, the other side to that is the master blender also has to take into consideration how many of these cigars need to be made. If you're a small cigar company, you may be able to use a little bit more unique or rare tobaccos. If you're making a cigar for a huge cigar conglomerate, these rare tobaccos, you're not going to be able to procure enough of them. So then you have to play that into your blending as well.
Okay, well, let's start in no particular order here before we go back and forth. Can you just give us...
Hey, Miguel.
Yeah.
How many of these people he's about to name can take a Big Mac and make a gourmet meal?
You know what?
That's the trick.
You know what's funny? Before we get into this, actually,
I
saw I don't know if it's Instagram or whatever.
That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, I've seen people where they'll take a McDonald's bag and they'll say, "Make my food gourmet,"
and the dude rips it up, and he does.
Yeah, so
and
cool.
He just pulls the French fries, does something with it, purees them or something.
Well, do you want me to start with one of them?
Let's just introduce all the five you have here, and then we'll go from there.
All right, Carlos Fuente, rest in peace. Jose Padron, rest in peace as well. Henke Kellner, Nestor Plasencia, and my absolute favorite, Ernesto Perez Carrillo, EPC.
Man, I made a reference to him earlier that you agreed to.
Where do we go from here now?
Well, just tell us a little bit about quickly how these five have made today's episode.
Well, I think Carlos Fuente, I think you have to really understand the story of the Fuente family. Starting in Tampa, and then, at one time they were in Nicaragua, and their barns and their factory burned, and they went to the Dominican, reestablished themselves. I mean, that was a brand that really probably should have gone out of business because they had so much hardship, but they wouldn't give up. And Carlos Sr., who's now passed away, Carlitos, his son that most people are familiar with, Carlos really helped create, the Hemingway, the Don Carlos, and all these legendary cigars. And you can argue the Hemingway blend or the Hemingway cigar with the unique shapes and the figurados, they were not part of the industry. Those sizes had completely died out, and single-handedly brought that back into vogue. And obviously the Dominican wrapper in 95, 96, which they really pioneered. And really going through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the hard times, getting to the boom of the 90s. He created and influenced so many people in this industry. And if you're talking about master blenders, he's definitely one of them.
All right.
Jose Padron. Jose is a good example of a guy who fled communist Cuba. Was missing the cigars that he smoked growing up, and so he wound up establishing his own cigar brand in Miami, a little Havana. He had a factory in Nicaragua and Honduras. Now they're predominantly Nicaraguan. They were a cigar that was very affordable, great for the Miami and the Florida market. And in 95, 96, I would say that when they created the Anniversario, that was really the beginning of the super premium and box press, which again was out of vogue. And they brought box press, trunk press back into vogue, and now you see a ton of cigars box pressed, and all of that goes back to that original Anniversario blend that they released in the 90s. They were Nicaraguan, them and Hoya de Nicaragua, before everyone else flooded the Nicaraguan market, right? Before the Garcias, before, God, you can name everybody, Pichardo, all these guys. Padron was part of that Nicaraguan cigar culture industry when it was very raw. And as hot as we see Nicaragua is today, the number one importer of premium cigars to the United States is Nicaragua. A lot of that can trace back to two brands, Hoya de Nicaragua and the Padrones.
Very good. And in no particular order, up number 3.
Henke Kellner is known probably most for Davidoff. Henke was a guy who, has tobacco in his veins. His sons followed in his footsteps as well. But you had this brand Davidoff that was made in Cuba all the way up to, I want to say maybe 91, 92. I don't know the exact year, but when they left Cuba, they settled in the Dominican, and they brought Henke Kellner and his factory on board and created today one of the most popular, one of the most sought-after brands in the world.
What other cigar was he making at the same time?
Avo?
No.
Give me the name.
Ashton.
Oh, Ashton. At that time. Wow. Now Ashton is Fuente. Yeah.
Henry was making a Davidoff cigar, and he was making an Ashton cigar. Along with Ashton had the first cigar made with Fuente. Mm-hmm. So they had to make a choice, and so did Davidoff. Mm-hmm. And the split happened. Ashton went to Fuente, which created a beautiful Dominican, and Henry went with Davidoff, which created a beautiful Dominican.
Yeah, and I think Henke's influence was Dominican was a country that really produced great tobacco, great cigars, but maybe not produce that high-end, high-grade, and I think Henke gets a lot of credit. Now, look, he worked with Eladio Diaz, was a master blender with him over at Davidoff, and Eladio Diaz is an absolute legend. So when you say Henke Kellner, I think of also of Diaz. I mean, I think those guys created something very special and should be very much respected on that top 10, top 20.
Because by the time when you look at Henry and his position and what he does, and the trickle down, it's the people underneath them that are creating the lemon whipping that goes on the cake.
You're right.
Right, that makes it all look beautiful for him.
And that's Eladio. Eladio Diaz was that guy. Eladio gets a lot of that respect.
You have to look at that. If you got great people underneath you that are creating their steps, then you have nothing but easy opportunity to create a good cigar.
Absolutely. The next one would be Nestor Plasencia. I don't think, it's funny, Plasencia cigars now are very popular. Mm-hmm. But that was not the case. He was always known as one of the greatest farmers. He had the most tobacco being grown in Nicaragua and Honduras. The legend of that family goes back generations, and now Nestor Plasencia Jr. is following in his father's footsteps. At the end of the day, they're truly farmers and master blenders, and he has huge facilities, tobacco facilities, but he also has factories that make cigars. And you can see so many great cigar companies go to him to make their cigars. I know you guys sell Crux really well. Crux is made by him, among many other brands and blends. And Nestor, when people say, "Oh man, I really like those Plasencia cigars. I'm kind of new to them," and we go, "Well, you've smoked Plasencia tobacco. You just didn't know you were smoking Plasencia tobacco, because half the cigars in the industry have his tobacco." Mm-hmm. His influence is very far-reaching, and I think among all the people, they have one of the best blending rooms I've ever seen. It's this room they have with all these little drawers with all this tobacco, and you can just it's like a library. So there may not be anyone in the modern-day cigar world that has more reach than Nestor Plasencia.
And then finally, you already gave away your favorite. Tell us about E. Picarillo.
E. Picarillo, Ernie to me, and look, I'm very biased. Ernie to me represents a generation of cigar makers and blenders that many have passed on, right? Carlos Fuente, Jose Padron, Ronaldo Reyes Jr. We can go on and on and on of all the people that have passed away. And I think Ernie's part of that group that really came up through the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Ernie is a legend. When it comes to Nicaraguan tobacco and Dominican tobacco, he is king. He is so well versed on blending. He also is known as the Sultan of Sumatra. You don't get a name like that without being a person that truly has his hands in Ecuadorian wrapper from the Sumatra seed. He is incredible. I mean, he took over La Gloria Cubana for his father. He wound up selling that in the 90s to General Cigar, continued to grow that brand. And then when he left, he established EP Cigars with his son and daughter, Ernie Jr. and Lisette. And they are continuing in their father's footsteps. I will tell you, I have been at several cigar events in my life where there have been many big cigar name brand guys, owners that are marketers, some are blenders, and they all pay homage to Ernie. They all pay homage to him. I have been at events where Ernie is being mobbed not only by cigar enthusiasts, but other cigar makers. Ernie walks the walk, talks the talk. That man could have retired many years ago, but he still finds himself in the Dominican Republic 2 weeks out of every month, And you're not going to sit down with a guy who gets more excited about tobacco.
Very good. And before we start the debate portion, I feel like Stephen A. Smith, we're a little bit of first take going on here. This was an idea that Ethan had based on a text exchange that Miguel and Wild Bill had a while ago. Ethan, can you tell us a little bit about how this came to be and why you thought this would be a good time to have them come together on the podcast?
Sure. Like you said, it was a few years ago. I was trying to kind of get my bearings when it comes to the industry, the history, how all of the players mesh. And it's actually a quote that I think Bill gave me. You cannot understand this story without relationships. There is generational knowledge that's been passed down. For you to acquire the best leaves, it's all about relationships. And so you really can't understand the history and the flow of how tobacco has worked apart from the relationships. And then even, I think, a few conversations with Miguel. And he said the thing to appreciate about this is that this is a uniquely American story. This is an American agricultural product that has swept the globe and has nuanced itself and become more and more detailed and intricate. But it's a fascinating story. It will give you kind of an underpinning on history, and it will increase your appreciation of what we smoke. But this debate that we had, I think I kind of, pulled Miguel in because I was interested. He's articulate, he's well studied, and I wanted to hear what he had to say. So he fired back his top 5, and I copied Bill on it. And then Bill and him went round. Oh, you didn't say living only, and it just went back and forth. And I felt like, man, I gained so much from just being a part of this conversation that with having Miguel here for the weekend, let's bring him in and share the love.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So, Bill, let's start. First question for you. Now, Miguel was very good about prefacing that there are many others that he respects that are widely known as master blenders. But when we asked him to have 5, of course, that leaves a few off. In your opinion, who's he missing?
Living or dead?
Up to you.
Nicholas Milano.
Nicholas Melillo from Foundation Cigars is incredible. Julio,
the father of Corojo.
Irora, he is...
And look what he's done for his country, Honduras.
What an
well
amazing...
respected, and what he does to the people and what he gives back, amazing.
And aren't the stories about him amazing? The guy would rather spend...
Flew his own plane and crashed it and still would rather spend $2 million to put irrigation in, so he does, and now he has quality leaf when it doesn't rain in
I will
6
tell you
months.
this, if we were doing a top 5 of farmers, he may be my number 1.
Well,
Who's
okay, then some of your blenders there I can say are top marketers and not master blenders.
Okay.
And I can say some of the other ones which you agreed to earlier in the podcast, which we can rewind to. Some of them are not necessarily hold master qualities, even though they made a cigar line, made some money off it, sold it, disappeared, not like a weekend, but like years, and then comes back to create something, which is something great. I'm not slating it, but when I look at a master blender, I don't think there's very many in the industry. I think there's great people that know how to create a team that can purchase, grow, manipulate tobacco to get it to what the artist has in his mind, and he's able to articulate that to people to get those raw materials. So I believe it's a team necessarily, but also a master blender has to have the ability to teach. And some of those on that list, I don't see teaching. Because a master isn't worried about his knowledge as much as he wants to express it to the underling.
Of course, because that's how we pass along information, right? It's like having a kid. you're passing on your knowledge and you're hoping that they will learn from you and learn from mistakes or even improve upon.
Now,
right?
granted, I'll give you like Pepin, right? He started out rolling and then became a farmer, and he loves farming because that was in his blood. And he created a company. He's created some top cigars for other people, not including
for us,
himself, like a few other people on that line, like Fuente. So, is he a great blender? Does he have a great story? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But is he a master? And he's highly respected by the Padrones and the Fuentes and all of them because of what he's able to do. But you can't have 20 and 30 master blenders. There's only can be one or two. That's
wow. Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
One or two. So just to rewind, Miguel said he could probably name 10 to 20.
Yeah.
And Bill says one or two. Well,
think about this. Think about this. All right, I'll give you 10 to 20. But out of 10 to 20, someone's number one and someone's number two, and those are the masters. Period.
Yeah.
And someone has to be 20.
Right, which means if you're number 20, man, you a C- in the master world.
Yeah.
So you got some belt levels to pick up.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you got some knowledge to pick up.
So it'd be like Michelin stars for a restaurant.
Okay.
You get 3 or 4
Absolutely.
stars, you're untouchable. 1 star means you're still really damn good.
Because you can look at my favorite cigar, right? The Padrones. They're great. They're consistent. They mastered consistency. But did they master creativity?
Right. So also, yeah, you're right. I mean, like, what if you have a guy like, let's talk about Christian Irora, his father, Julio, his brother Justo. They are masters of Honduran tobacco. What you're saying is like with the Padrones, what if they had to work with Dominican tobacco? Could they also produce this? And what if, they had to? So yeah, I hear what the angle you're going. You could be a master of one, maybe like a chef, right? He's a master of Italian cuisine
Bakery,
or French or whatever, but throw them in a kitchen and with Mexican ingredients, maybe they're not as good, right? So yeah, I can see that.
So out of that, what is a master then? Because he has to be able to teach, educate, have compassion, create.
And to me, it would make sense, though, that you, as a master blender, understand best your own native soil.
Yeah.
The contribution that you've made to the industry is you put Honduras on the map, or you put.
I think you understand all countries of origin soil where tobacco can be grown. Period.
And I think today that's harder, right?
Correct.
Because if you take some of the master blenders from the 60s, right? Well, or let's say the 50s, right? Well, the majority of the cigars that were being smoked were Cuban. And you were working with Cuban tobacco all from one country. Now you have different regions, right? But majority of the tobacco comes from the Pinar del Rio region of Cuba. And it's almost like, comparing basketball players before the three-point line and those after the three-point line, right? The ones that came after the three-point line could score a hell of a lot more points than those other guys, right? Quicker. And so today's master blender, maybe what you're saying, is probably has a lot more knowledge to understand than maybe a guy 50 years ago, 60 years ago, or so on.
Yeah, because just look at the simple Connecticut wrapper and what is done in the industry with its own price point.
Yeah. I mean, Connecticut grown in Connecticut, and then now you have Ecuadorian Connecticut grown. Absolutely. Which are two completely different. One is shade grown, one's technically a sun grown wrapper because it's grown in Ecuador and there's no cheesecloth, to put over the leaves there. You don't need it. Yeah. I think today there's so much complexity because there's also hybrid seeds. So when someone sees a tobacco and they go, oh, what's Corojo 99? And sometimes they think that's when it was grown. But that's actually a hybrid Corojo seed that was invented, if you will, bred in 1999. Criollo 98, same thing. It's a hybrid seed. So guys 40 years ago didn't have those seed strains. They were using more Corojo, Criollo. So as things change and hybrids come, in fact, Cuba, if you read a lot about Cuban tobacco, they're not growing Corojo and Criollo anymore down there, and those were the native seeds to win the Cuban heyday. They're so susceptible to black shank and blue mold, these diseases that attack tobacco. So for the sake of their industry, they had to use hybrid seeds. So the Cuban cigar tastes different today than it did back in the 50s. So the knowledge you need today is probably way more in depth, way more than you've ever needed in the history of cigar smoking.
Plus, you have to be able to go anywhere and create. And you have to create a top-notch item each time you put your finger on it.
I don't think, if I understand the story right, that Julio uses any hybrids. I think he just didn't like the taste.
Yeah.
They might have more resistance to whatever, but he's just like, I don't like them.
I think what Julio is famous for is growing the true Corojo and Criollo seed, or the Corojo especially.
The authentic Corojo.
Right? And that's why their kind of hashtag is authentic Corojo, because 99% of the people in the industry, I don't care who you are, you're using hybrid seeds, which are fantastic too, right? But he's stuck very much to that traditional. Now, those plants tend to be smaller. They tend to grow less yield. So growing it is a labor of love. If you want to just grow a shit ton of tobacco, you're not growing Corojo and Criollo, you're growing the hybrids and things like that, because those authentic seeds are smaller, they're more pain in the ass to take care of, they're more susceptible to these diseases. And a guy like Julio, that is what he cut his teeth on, and that is his legacy. And his sons, Justo and Christian, are carrying that forward. And I mean, you talk about best farmers. I mean, you could say Nestor Plasencia and Julio Aurora are top notch of the bin.
Notice there was no E.P. Carrillo.
I think, well, if Ernie was here, Ernie would tell you that Ernie's not a farmer.
I know.
He's a Miami boy.
But see,
born in Cuba, raised in Miami.
So that's why I don't know if there is such a thing that is truly a master in the industry. I think there's some unique, great, qualified.
So right there, you actually have caused me to think
That's what I do.
A different way, because you can be a master blender of cigars and not be a farmer. But something you've made me think about is, does that raises, if you know the farming, if you know, look, a master blender needs to know what regions give what kind of flavors and what kind of this, but are you the guy with the soil? Are you the guy that is another level? You're right. And that is a maestro.
For example, let's just say you have a master blender who is also a farmer, and they're like, I am looking for this flavor. I'm looking for this taste, and I have never found it in anybody else's product. I haven't been able to find it in my own product. But if you are, in fact, the farmer as well, you can grow the leaf for your particular flavor you're looking for.
If you got a farmer and a blender, then that leaves out people like Fuente. They don't grow that much tobacco. So are they considered a farmer then?
Well, I think most companies don't grow. In fact, I would say 9 out of 10 don't grow the majority of their tobacco.
Right.
A lot of companies do grow a little bit, or they may grow a special wrapper, or they may have small fields that they blend into their tobacco, but very few. I know any that strictly use their own tobacco because
you can't.
You could be in Nicaragua and you can literally grow all the Nicaraguan tobacco you may use. But you may want a Mexican wrapper, and you don't have a farm in Mexico, or you may need an Ecuadorian wrapper, and so essentially we're all tied in with each other, and we're all using different. Even if a person grows a ton of tobacco, they're still using other tobaccos, and the secret of a great Nicaraguan cigar is a leaf of Dominican. Some people will say, or whatever it is. Or some guys go, hey, I really like Cameroon, but I'm going to grow it in a different country. And they've created some new kind of, a Cameroon grown in Honduras. So they're constantly creating or finding ways to put their spin on something. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know how much arguing we're going to be able to do because
you're agreeing on most things.
I know we're agreeing on, but it makes me think because there are great guys like Plasencia who take it from seed to smoke. There's guys like Ernie.
But I would say Plasencia along the way, he might grow the greatest tobacco that everybody uses. But he's not a master simply because where he loses it compared to some of the other on the list is his ability to market his own stuff isn't as great. So he loses a little bit of shadow of his mastery compared to somebody like Carlos Fuente who can market the shit out of something.
Well, Plasencia, I mean, I would argue that maybe in the 90s and early 2000s, their own blends, Organica and these blends, it didn't do well. I mean, they just didn't sell well. But his blends of today, Alma Fuerte and all these are some of the hottest cigars in the industry. They have, you can be a great chef and your restaurant can close. you can be a great master blender tobacco grower, and your brand.
Nobody smokes it.
Yeah, and marketing, right? And marketing is a very important tool. It's something that people don't like to talk about in this industry.
Sure.
But marketing is very important. And Plasencia has hit that marketing now. Fuente is probably one of the best marketers in our business, and they do grow some incredible tobacco. They buy other tobacco, and it makes some of the most popular cigars in the world today.
And one of the ways that we can tell here at the shop how good someone's marketing may be is with our novice or relatively novice smoker coming in and asking for a brand. Now, they may not know which variety they want from the brand, but they will ask for a brand. So there might be a little cue for who's doing the marketing on that side.
What brands are they asking for?
Unfortunately, some that we don't carry because we have a very specific way our humidor is stocked. And ours is, much like Ethan said in the beginning, relationships.
Relationships are key. Relationships are key in this business. Everything from a master blender buying tobacco, right? There's grades of tobacco. The longer you've been around, the relationships established allow you to get choice pickings of tobacco. Proximity to certain countries allow you to get your hands on different tobaccos that they may not ship outside of the country because maybe not enough is being grown. Relationships play a huge part in this business. Now, for you to be a master blender, you probably have incredible relationships with farmers. You probably have incredible relationships with your rollers and just incredible people around you. I'm a firm believer that nobody does it on their own. Nobody. Anyone who you call master blender, they are the head chef. You're rarely going to have the head chef cook for you. Their job is to disseminate their vision to people around them and to produce that product that they're looking for. And so all of these people that I had named and people that maybe Bill would name have an incredible team around them that help them get to where they're at. I think of it almost like a race car driver. Lewis Hamilton gets all the credit, but the fact is he's got a crew of 150 people that take care of his car and everything.
Yep.
And those guys are kind of unsung heroes, and that's kind of what happened. Now, the interesting story with Pepin was a cigar roller in Cuba.
Yep.
How many people do you know that are brand owners or master blenders that started at a rolling table? Very few. I think Oscar in Honduras, who has Leaf by Oscar and some of these other ones, I think he started out as a roller. And Don Pepin started out as a roller and made it all the way to owning a little factory in Miami to owning a huge factory in Nicaragua. That is an incredible story to me.
Let me ask you about another qualification and whether you think it gains points or loses points with a master blender. Would you say if they created one or two flagship phenomenal cigars, or they created a wide variety of different cigars, does that factor into your opinion about their abilities?
I heard a great quote once. It said, if you make a cigar that everybody likes, you'll never make a cigar somebody loves.
Interesting.
And I think if you create one or two blends that are well-regarded, well-respected, that is harder to do than creating a cigar that just commercially sells well across the board.
But Gordon Ramsay can go into any restaurant and create an excellent meal, no matter what denomination of foods he's dealing with. Can these people step up into Honduras and create a quality cigar? Can a Honduran step up into Nicaragua? Can a Nicaraguan step up into the DR? Can the DR step up into Colombia? That's the truth on a master.
Yeah.
Just because they...
Almost the Iron Chef, right? You don't know what the ingredients are.
You have to.
Yeah. You know what was interesting? Let me throw this at you. You may remember this, Bill. You and I have been around the cigar industry a long time. I want to say it was maybe the late 90s, maybe the early 2000s. There was a competition between Christian Irora and Lito Gomez of Flor Dominicana. And they put out a cigar. And what they did was they sent each other tobacco. And they had to use a tobacco to create a cigar. And look, it wasn't a huge success, but there was ads about it. It was really neat. Yeah. And that kind of takes into what you're talking about is they said, hey, can I make a great cigar with your tobacco? And can you make a great cigar with my tobacco? And that was really, really neat. Yeah. Really neat. Next time you guys talk to Christian, I know you guys are really tight with Christian. You should ask him about that. That was kind of a neat. I remember seeing the ads, and I remember people talking about it, thinking, "Oh man,
who's the other
really
blender?"
Neat. It was Lito Gomez of La Flor Dominicana. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And they put out ads and everything about it. It was really neat.
Is a marketer a master blender?
No. I worked for CAO Cigars my first 7 years in the business 20 years ago. And we didn't blend cigars. We worked with the Toraño family. And the Toraño family had a gentleman and his sons his name was Fidel Oliva, no relation to Oliva Cigar or Oliva Tobacco. Fidel was the master blender, and he worked with Disla, one of the brothers, who's Dominican, lived in Nicaragua, and his brother's Raul Disla. And they were the master blenders, even though there was the Toraño Cigar Factory, and they relied on them and they created all the CAO cigars. But again, Tim Osgener and I'm smoking an Osgener cigar right now, the Iramos, he would go to them and say, hey, this is what I want to create. This is what I want to do. I remember Tim saying, hey, this Brazilian wrapper you have is beautiful. And people go, well, you don't tell anyone you use a Brazilian wrapper. And Tim goes, no, I'm going to create a cigar and call it Brasilia. and so, he was able to tap into their expertise and create incredible cigars, because at the heyday of CAO, this is before Ricky Rodriguez. This is before General Cigar. This was when it was an independent, family-owned company by the Osgeners. You did not find a hotter brand at that time. I mean, they were gigantic, and they relied on other people to blend their cigars. So I worked for that, and I worked for Toraño as well.
You worked for a marketing company.
Yeah, CAO was a marketing company, right?
I worked for a marketing company.
And I think Ashton is a brand that I really, truly love. I truly love their Ashton cabinet. And they're a marketing company. They don't own a factory. They don't own fields. Crowned Heads, we don't own a factory. We don't own fields. We work with great cigar makers that have great access to these relationships. 50% of our cigars are made by Ernesto Perez Carrillo. Ernie's a guy who I fell in love with his cigars in the 90s. He had a cigar called El Rico Habano in the 90s. La Gloria Cabana was the flashy girl at the party. El Rico Habana was the full-bodied, nobody was touching it.
That was the rough bearded motherfucker.
Exactly.
In the corner, smoking a cigarette,
and
drinking a whiskey.
But it's funny because when you talk about that cigar, Ernie loved El Rico Habano, but that was his taste. But La Gloria was the big brand, right? And so, long story short, what I'm getting to is I've worked for marketing companies, and you cannot have a successful brand if you don't have great relationships. And God, I mean, who are the best master blenders in this business? That's like saying who's the best. Who's the greatest basketball player?
Jordan.
Michael Jordan. You and I will say Michael Jordan. But talk to a younger guy and he'll say Kobe Bryant, bro.
Talk to an
older guy. He'll say
Larry Bird
or Wilt Chamberlain or somebody.
Magic
you know what
Johnson.
I mean?
Sure. Well, we've gone through 5 of the many master blenders on the list Miguel has picked. Bill, who did he leave out that you'd like to pitch for right now?
Simple, Mr. Foundation Cigar, Nicholas.
Nicholas Melillo is a great cigar maker. Why don't you give a little background on Nick?
Nick's a young guy. He uses traditional tobaccos for his own company. He blended some of the great cigars at Drew Estate and then ventured off on his own when Swisher Street was buying Drew Estate.
And Nick is amazing. I consider Nick to be a master blender. He is on my top 20. I think he's young. I don't think you can put him in the same breath as the Fuente, the Padrones, the Hankies, the Nestors, the Carrillos, the Auroras.
I think so, because some of his cigars are in the top 1, top 2, top 3, top 4.
Well, I will tell you, his Tabernacle is out of this world. Out of this world.
His Liga Privada?
Yes, his league provider. I didn't want to say it. He's got the upsetters, his flavor line, and then of course, his new Olmecs are incredible. He's obviously what I love about Nick is that he kind of is like Olmec, right? You go, what the heck's an Olmec? Well, it gets people thinking.
I mean, Nick hasn't disappeared for a decade.
No, he has not. He's not disappeared, but
he's been out there for 2 decades.
He lives in Connecticut. I think Connecticut he lives in. He lives like near the Connecticut farms. He's a huge broadleaf guy. He loves broadleaf. I will argue that he is a master blender, but I would not put him in the same breath as Ernesto Perez Carrillo.
Do you think he can get there in another 10 years?
Yes.
I think he's there.
I think over the next 10 years, look, these guys get old and they pass away. And these guys stepped in when somebody else passed away, right? And he is, out of all the young guys...
So a couple of those dudes passed away, so he's on that list. Amen.
Boom! He is a master blender, but I would not listen if I'm
Some
making.
of those people are dead.
We're in South Dakota, right? We're in South Dakota, and you guys have Mount Rushmore, right? And I always think of your Mount Rushmore of cigar makers or cigar blenders or however you want to call them. I love Nick Melillo. I love Foundation, but I would not have put him on my Mount Rushmore yet.
Okay. You're just a chicken because you like dead people.
I see dead people. No, you're right. You're right. I mean, Jose Padron has passed away. Carlos Fuentes passed away. I mean, I would at least say that Carlito has definitely stepped up. I mean, he was the engine behind creating the Opus, which is Hall of Fame cigar. Either you love it or hate it, doesn't matter. It's a Hall of Fame cigar. Jorge, the son of Jose Padron, Jorge is less in the face as far as I don't even know. Like, I love their cigars. But is he the master blender for that? I don't know. I couldn't tell you because he's not that guy who's doing the interviews talking about making cigars like Carlito does. Hanky has continued on. Hanky's making cigars with other people now, and his right-hand man, Eladio Diaz, has his own factory now with his sons. And Nestor Plasencia is passing it on to Nestor Jr. EP, I would say that his two kids are more on the business side, more on the marketing side. So he's got people around him at the factory that are picking up that knowledge. But I do think that Nick Melillo is definitely a master blender.
Yeah, because two are dead.
But is he on my Mount Rushmore? Not yet. Well,
there's only 4 people. You got 5. 2 are dead, so 2 of your 4 are dead, which means you got 2 spots. Nicholas Milano should be up there. I call him Milano.
I know. Milano. I was going to say Melissa Milano.
Yeah, she's
90s, baby. 90s. Remember that? Good Lord. You know what? I may have to put up the white flag. I'm going to be custard here, and I'm waving the white flag. I have lost this battle. Nick Melillo is being moved. The mic is getting dropped. The mic is being dropped.
In a beer. I dropped the mic in a beer.
Yeah, and you won this. You won this.
I only won it with 2 words. Dude's name.
Incredible. Well,
thank you for coming. Don't cry. Lunch is arriving.
Tip your waiters. The last thing I want to say is
thank you.
You guys are doing an awesome job at bringing knowledge, conversation to the cigar masses. I love what you guys do. And to all the cigar smokers out there, there are so many great cigars to smoke. Some of the ones we mentioned, and there's a lot of guys we haven't mentioned. If you're smoking cigars, you are carrying the flag of the next generation of this.
You're a master smoker.
You're a master smoker, certified by Wild Bill.
And the team at DTC.
And I got to tell you guys are doing awesome, and I feel it a pleasure to be here on this stage with you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for coming. And also, not to let the cat out of the bag, but there's a possibility that there might be a cigar down the road. We're still a ways away from it, directly tied into DTC Blow and Smoke podcast. And maybe we should ask Nick if that's something he would be interested in creating with us. What do you think, Ethan? Pretty good idea?
I think it's a great idea.
All right. That's going to do it for episode number 36. Don't forget, coming up here in Deadwood, for those visiting or living around the area, we have Hops and Hogs coming up next weekend, and followed by Oktoberfest. Our good buddy Maxwell from Shiner will be here for that. Tony from Crux, Placencia, as we have learned.
Eye Candy Randy will be here.
Eye Candy Randy will be here. Ethan behind the board, mixing and mastering. This has been one of the most entertaining and educational podcasts I've had the pleasure of being on. So thank you both very much for being here. Thank you. We will see you next time. That's episode 36, the DTC Blow and Smoke podcast. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.